An adventure. All right. Hi, everyone. For real this time, we have the technology figured out. Thank you for your patience. So we are live this evening doing this webinar. So if you are joining us live, you can put any questions, comments, thoughts, anything you'd like in the chat, and we're able to see that and respond to it live. So this will also be recorded and will be shared out on our social media platforms afterwards. So if you're not able to catch it tonight, or if you want to rewatch it later, you absolutely are able to do that. So my name is Hannah. I'm with Family Source Consultant, obviously. I am working as an educational marketing consultant, and I was also a one-time surrogate I delivered last year. So with me, I have Jordan and Crystal, and we are going to have them both introduce themselves. And tonight we're excited to be talking about specifically feeding your newborn and the options that intended parents have. So Jordan, can you introduce yourself to everyone, please?
Absolutely. So my name is Jordan. I'm one of the nurses that helps with the intake/match team. So I do a lot of the medical reviews, and I am also a certified lactation counselor. So I get to help offer those services to our surrogates, either preparation for before delivery and consults after if they're having problems. I am also a 3-time surrogate. I'm currently 12 and 3 days pregnant with surrogate baby number technically 4, but 3rd journey.
It's so exciting. I can't believe how fast that's going.
Right?
And Crystal.
Hi, I'm Crystal V, and I am a certified professional midwife and licensed midwife, and I'm also a CLC like Jordan, a certified lactation counselor. Here at Family Source, I am the lead surrogate intake coordinator. So I help bring new surrogates and interested surrogates into this process and help them begin their journey and make sure that they are a good candidate for surrogacy and answer all of their initial questions. So, yeah.
Fantastic. Well, we are so excited to rely on both of your expertise for our topic tonight. And again, just in case folks joined us, we are live right now. So if you have questions or comments or anything you'd like to include, please just go ahead and put that in the chat on whatever platform you're watching on, and we'll be able to respond to those questions directly. But I have plenty of questions because I'm so interested in this topic. So let's talk about feeding babies. So what options are there for intended parents when they're considering how they'd like to go about feeding their newborn?
I'm happy to start if you want, Crystal. So typically the options for feeding your baby are, in our area, would be more like donor milk, so having your surrogate supply milk. As an intended parent, you can also look into the option to induce lactation. And that could be either breast or chest feeding, because both moms or dads can pursue that, along with formula as being your option. So in my world, a fed baby is a happy baby. I know Crystal will have some cool tips on like tools you can use for feeding baby as well.
Yeah. I think we have some questions coming up specifically for that, but absolutely. Sounds good.
Yeah, so do you, so it sounds like the options really for intended parents would be formula, donor milk, or inducing lactation. And donor milk, it sounds like, can come from either the surrogate specifically, or can intended parents, and do they get donor milk from other places? And what would some of those options look like?
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that wasn't mentioned is all 3 of those things can be used in combination. And so you don't have to use just one source to feed your baby. So lots and lots of moms use blended options for feeding their babies. Sorry, I have little ones in the background. But yeah, so tell me the question again. I got caught up on the different types of feeding.
We've all been there. Yep. So the question specifically about if they're not going to use their surrogate, are there other places where they can get donor milk?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, back from the beginning of time, there have been wet nurses, which were people who were hired or it was their job to nurse a baby. Now, sometimes that was a wonderful, beautiful thing, and sometimes there's history of that not being a wonderful, beautiful thing. But that has been done from the beginning of time. And there are lots of avenues for getting donor milk. It is important that whatever avenue someone utilizes to get donor milk, that it is a safe way to get donor milk. Milk is technically considered a bodily fluid, so it is important to make sure that your donor has been screened in some way, shape, or form. Obviously, when your donor is your surrogate, you have trusted this person to carry your baby in their body, and so it feels like it comes natural to trust them to feed your baby after the fact. But there are lots of different options. Most of your donor milk banks are more suited for hospital use for your micro preemies and babies who are at risk. And that's what most of that milk is utilized for. But there are lots of options such as like Eats on Feets that is human milk for human babies. Those are some grassroots organizations that help connect milk donors to milk recipients.
Yep. I also have like if you have a connection with an IBCLC that has their own outpatient business, that is a trusted source and screening moms who may need help if you have like oversupply or something like that.
Those are some outstanding resources. So obviously, Jordan, you had said before that a fed baby is a happy baby. We all like when babies are fed. So are there particularly benefits to using human milk though?
So I love to talk about how breast milk is one of those things that is constantly changing, and in some forms it's kind of alive based on how it's produced. So there's two mechanisms or pathways that breast milk is changing. One is from baby saliva. So if you're putting baby to breast, baby saliva will seep through the nipple line and will allow that whatever baby's needs, or say baby comes in contact with some kind of germs, your body will help create the defense and needs that your baby is needing. That is one factor that an exclusive pumper kind of misses out on. But then that's where the second phase comes in, or the second pathway is a mom. Also, whatever mom is coming into contact with will change the milk based on what baby will need or what she's coming into contact with. So making sure even if you're sick, keep on feeding that baby your breast milk, because it'll help create the immunities that you're coming in contact with for that baby. Breast milk specifically is also more biologically available than formula. It can help line the GI system to help prevent any bad bacteria or bad microbiome line their gut in that first couple of days. That's really important. It's also antimicrobial, and it's a very natural laxative.
These are all helpful things. So it sounds like there are like actual scientific benefits to using, even if it's just going to be donor milk, whether it's from the surrogate or someone else. But again, don't stress yourself out too hard over that. So there's a lot of reasons why formula might work better for a lot of intended parents, I think, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, there is some like benefits also to pumping and or breastfeeding, and that's not, oh goodness, it's a benefit to either the surrogate or the breastfeeding. In the research that I found, it's more based on women, not men, but I know that life is changing and that transgender and men can also lactate. So the research that I have just talks about how if you breastfeed for about a year, it can decrease the probability of a woman having type 2 diabetes by 50%, and it can decrease the chance of endometrial, breast cancer, and ovarian cancer, along with decreased risks for hypertension, high lipids, cardiovascular disease, and heart attack. So there are benefits not just in the milk for baby, but also benefits to those who choose to pursue lactating. Words, sorry.
I got you. It's tough out there. That's very interesting. So let's talk about induced lactation a little bit. So this was a thing that truly I did not know was possible before I became a surrogate myself. And I was like, people are doing what out there? That is wild. So bodies are really cool. Feeding babies is really cool. So why would an intended parent choose to induce lactation, and how the heck do they go about doing that?
So induced lactation is utilized not just by intended parents after a surrogacy journey, but also for lots of other situations. So parents who adopt a baby. We talked a little bit about transgendered folks who want to nurse their babies. Also, sometimes if you have two partners who both want to nurse the baby, that can be a reason to induce lactation. During like global emergencies, induced lactation is one of the methods that the WHO, the World Health Organization, recommends to actually save babies' lives when there's not appropriate food available. And so induced lactation has lots of different reasons, but for our intended parents, this becomes a way that they can feel close to the baby. Not that you can't feel close if you're not nursing, but it also, I feel like, may benefit some intended parents who have struggled with a pregnancy journey in the past and feeling that their body is doing this for their baby, and they're the only one who can provide this when they've struggled with that in the past. I feel like that might be very rewarding for them. And then obviously the physical benefits of breastfeeding, like you mentioned, decrease in the risk of diabetes and obesity and breast cancer and all sorts of things. And also for the baby, when you have a baby who is latching on directly, like you were talking about, that biofeedback mechanism where the baby's saliva actually talks to the breast and tells the breast what type of milk needs to be made and what type of immune cells need to be made. So those would definitely be reasons to do that. There is, it's kind of an up and down there balance, also with like the financial aspect of things. And so having a baby who can latch on and nurse means that there's no formula to buy, there's no bottles to wash, there's no having to get up in the middle of the night and make formula and heat it to the proper temperature and all of those things. And so they can just give the baby food directly from the tap, like we like to say.
Sometimes it's a bit easier that way. Sometimes it's harder, but sometimes it's easier.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, from the tap. I have a shirt that talks about that.
It's amazing. I love that on the sticker.
I was kind of kind of jump in and add that like opportunity for choosing why to induce lactation could be that opportunity for bonding with your baby, like Crystal was really saying, and that remembering that breastfeeding is also much more than just breast milk. Choosing to induce lactation can allow you more of that intimate, physical, emotional relationship for you and your baby.
These are all very valid reasons. And then who would you talk to if you were an intended parent who wanted to induce lactation? Like, what types of professionals do you need to get involved in that process?
So I highly recommend either consulting with an IBCLC or a CLC who's more knowledgeable about inducing lactation, along with your OB and or your IVF provider, because they're going to know more about your hormone history to be able to say, yes, this is something that we can help you do safely. Also, once baby is born, I feel like it's also really important to keep the pediatric provider involved, because when you're inducing lactation, there can be issues with proper amount of supply. So making sure that baby's weight gain and growth, all the milestones are being met at an appropriate time. So having that close connection with your lactation provider, your provider that you choose, whether that's IVF or OB or midwife or all the things, primary care, and then the baby's provider as well.
Okay, that all makes sense. That's a lot of folks, but it sounds like it's possible, and lots of people just need to be involved. Perfect. Now we do have a question from someone watching. So again, if you are watching live and you would like to ask a question, you're absolutely do so. We will answer live. So the question is, has there been a surrogate who can't pump for the parents? And then what would you suggest those intended parents do if their surrogate isn't able to pump?
I'm going to kind of share more of a personal / professional. So I had a consult with a surrogate a few months ago where she had horrible experiences with breastfeeding in general with her 2 prior children. So we did a consult to see if it was even a smart idea. The intended parents were kind of being pushy on, we at least want your colostrum. And so I talked to her about how, like, it's not a smart idea to start if you don't plan on keeping the status going. Like, if your goal is to not deal with mastitis or clogged ducts or all the things that you've dealt with in the past, then it's smarter to just not approach that in general, safety wise, because that can cause a lot of repercussion to go, well, I just want your colostrum. So like 1 or 2 weeks of pumping, but it could still take someone months to completely wean. So if they have a high risk of developing mastitis or clogged ducts or any kind of other issues that they can have, it's recommended to not. However, with that, you don't necessarily have to go straight to formula. Those intended parents could look into a different donor or looking into donor milk. I know I'm not as familiar with like international options, but there is options outside of your surrogate. I don't know if there's anything that Crystal would like to add in on part of that answer.
Yeah. Certainly there are lots of folks who struggle with breastfeeding, and pumping in my personal experience is even harder, I feel like, sometimes than breastfeeding directly. And so a lot of times the baby is a better source of emptying the milk than a pump is. And especially in the early days, colostrum is in a very small quantity. It's we call it liquid gold. It's kind of the power packed with the thing. So at first you're only producing drops at a time. So it may be very difficult. In fact, it's more like harvesting colostrum. And so sometimes, and this would need to be run by the surrogate's care provider. But sometimes in our practice as a midwife, we will have folks harvest colostrum prenatally once they are at term, so that that could give an option for those parents who want colostrum only without actually inducing an full-on lactation postpartum. If a surrogate were to run into issues with producing enough milk, then it would be the same thing that we recommend to anyone. See a lactation professional. Make sure that you are taking care of yourself. If you are not taking care of yourself, it is very difficult to make milk. Or technically, someone else needs to be taking care of you in order to take care of yourself many times postpartum. And so having the time and the ability to pump is important. So those are questions to definitely have with your surrogate throughout the process. If you're, all of our surrogates have been pregnant and given birth before, asking questions about their previous history with breastfeeding, whether it was positive or negative, can help you guys decide if this is the route that you want to go, or if you need to have some backup solutions in your pocket.
Yeah. And Crystal, can you just, even backing up a bit, like this was a great question that just came in the chat. So the difference between colostrum, like one, define colostrum, like what is it and how is it different than breast milk?
Yeah. So colostrum is breast milk. And so it is the first breast milk. It has a much higher fat and protein content to it than mature milk. It takes about 2 weeks for your milk to transition from just colostrum to full on what we call lactogenesis 2, which is mature milk. But most folks see a huge increase in their supply somewhere around day 3 or 4. And that's what we call the milk coming in. And so it usually, the amount grows with the baby's belly. And so when babies are born, their bellies are teeny tiny, like the size of a marble. And so you may only produce a teaspoon of colostrum at a time. And that would be a full feeding on that first day. And it's meant to be fed in small, very frequent cycles. So most of the time, babies will nurse or feed very frequently. Sometimes, we say every 2 to 3 hours, but it's really whenever the baby needs to feed. And so sometimes that could be every 3 hours, or sometimes that could be every 30 minutes. We follow those babies' cues. But colostrum is power packed with antibodies. And it is much different than mature milk in that way. Mature milk still has tons and tons of antibodies, but colostrum is meant to go in there and take away anything bad as the baby is exposed to it in the first few days. So it's really liquid gold, and it's very thick and sticky and golden color.
It's very cool how that all works. Yeah, my midwife called that second day, I think it was, an all-day buffet, because the baby is just, they're just latched forever, and you can't really get away from it.
Pretty accurate.
Yeah. So going back to inducing lactation then, so what are some of the challenges then that someone would face if they're trying to induce lactation?
So I am not as knowledgeable in inducing lactation, but I know that Crystal has a lot of bullet points. But one thing I do know is that when you induce lactation, you may not always get a full supply for baby. So this may require you to do both breast and or chest feeding, along with any supplementation, whether that's donor milk or formula of your choice.
Yeah, so I mean, some of the challenges that you would run into, in addition to not being able to make an adequate supply, would be it takes a period of time to induce lactation. And oftentimes, if you have never lactated before, especially, most people require medication. So you would have to be on a hormonal medication, be taken off of it, and then given other medication to induce lactation. In addition to, you would have to stimulate the breast. And so that is with a pump, and it would be as often as you would nurse a baby. So it would be 8 to 12 times in 24 hours. And you would have to do this for weeks in order to induce lactation to a sustainable level. So it would, and it may be, you know, for some intended parents, that may be a way to bond with the pregnancy and feel like they are also going through physical changes, because, you know, they are. So that might be a good point, but it is certainly challenging. And then most people who induce lactation also have to have some form of supplemental nursing system. And so now you could supplement with bottles. So you could feed the baby at the chest or breast first, and then have the other partner feed the baby a bottle to top them off, we like to say. Or you could have a supplemental nursing system, which is like almost like a little necklace that you wear that has milk or formula in it. And it has a little tube that runs along to the nipple. And then as the baby latches on, it actually sucks milk out of this little bottle. And so that does two things. It feeds the baby more milk, and it continues to stimulate the breast. So what causes lactation is stimulation. So that can be good. But that is a negative or a frustration, because you have to buy and purchase these supplies, you have to maintain them, you have to clean them. So that could be a downside to things. There's certainly a downside sometimes to having to nurse a baby every 2 hours or every hour if they want it, and, you know, wake up in the middle of the night. But babies feed when they want to anyway, so, you know, it's all a give and take.
Yeah. There's no easy way. It sounds like there's a challenge in whatever it is, but of course, very worth it, right?
And that hormonal portion, just to kind of help simplify it, because in our world, we have all the specifics, but the reason that the medications and the hormones are needed is you're kind of replicating the effect of delivering a placenta. So like being pregnant, delivering a placenta, and then all the hormones involved to create the natural like ease of lactating. So if that helps anybody understand like the why portion of the hormonal side to induce lactation, is to create that effect that would naturally occur if you were pregnant.
Yeah, it seems like quite an undertaking, but again, a good fit for a lot of folks. So it's just good to know, and good to be asking these questions. It sounds like pretty early on in the pregnancy or pretty early on in the process. So it takes a lot of ramp up. Yeah. What advice would you give then? I know we just have a few minutes left, but what advice would you give in general that maybe we haven't discussed yet for intended parents as they're making decisions about how to feed their baby? Crystal, you want to get started with that?
Sure, absolutely. So I think one of the most important things to remember is that a lot of the benefits of breastfeeding for both the parent and the baby actually stem from holding your baby close and skin to skin contact, and looking your baby in the eyes and talking to your baby and bonding with your baby. So whether you induce lactation, whether you feed your baby breast milk from your donor, or whether you feed your baby formula from a bottle, what's most important is that you are looking at your baby, you're loving your baby, and you're bonding with your baby, because that has more effect than any of the other things combined.
I have to agree. To kind of feed off the amazing point you just made, one of the things I used to share with intended parents in labor and delivery often was a study that talked about skin to skin. The skin to skin factor actually focused on intended fathers and how to get them more involved. Well, oxytocin is one of the primary hormones used to create breast milk. And so the study talks about all the benefits that come with intended moms, but the focus in the study was on dads. And they found that dads who also did skin to skin also had an increase in oxytocin. Oxytocin is not just for lactation. This is also our happy hormone. So it can create that spike of happiness and being more involved both physically and emotionally with your baby. So whether lactation is in the world or not, creating that trusting bond with your baby is also just super important, especially in that first year of life when they're going through those developmental stages of like trust versus mistrust and getting those relationships established.
Yeah, I think those are fantastic points. And specific, like I know we were talking a little bit before we jumped on here. I just think that this can be such a stressful topic for intended parents, for any other type of parents. Obviously, intended parents have some additional challenges to consider there, but it is there. Just take the pressure off. Like as long as baby's fed, you're making the right choices for you and your family. And you're finding the resources to do that. And that actually leads to one more really great question that came in the chat. Certified consultant, and does their CLC need to live near them?
So this is technically a two-part question. So if you know somebody and they live out of state who has their own outpatient business, more so with COVID, post-COVID, online lactation consultants are a thing. So you can do online consults. However, I still feel like in person is going to give you the best outcome. So even if you do decide to do a virtual consult, just know that there is an option to try to get in person, face to face. That can be covered or not covered by insurance. So double check your insurance because there is a possibility you could save. But my source for looking up a lactation consultant near you is the ALPP website. And you just type in the state that you live in, and it'll give you certified lactation counselors designated to the state that you live in. I think you can even pop in your zip code, and it'll give you the closest number of people as well.
And most places do have a La Leche League that's nearby, which is peer-to-peer. So these aren't professionals, but these are other parents who have walked in the trenches, maybe not the exact same way, but they've walked those trenches and they're, there to support you and hug you and hold your hand and come over and bring you a meal and tell you that you're doing well. So that can be just as important sometimes.
We love some good community, especially around all things parenting. So yes, hugely important. And obviously, again, we do have Jordan and Crystal on our team. So their information is on the Family Source website. Please, I don't want to speak exactly for you, but I know you all are terrific resources. And I think if anybody reached out, y'all would be welcoming of that. Is that right? Yeah. Enthusiastic over here.
It means much. I'm working on some projects in the very rare free time to help give us more supports outside of if you talk to your case manager and you're needing more help, whether you're an intended parent or a surrogate, just let them know, because then they can either reach out to me or Crystal, or I can arrange to chat with you myself and do an actual consult, and I'll make notes of the report. So we're here for you, whether that's is this a good idea for me, to I'm hurting, what do I do, explain what I'm doing wrong. Trust me, 90% of the time you're not doing anything wrong. So we're here. I hope to have some more flyers made and approved. I've got a handful that I just finished downloading for the case management team a couple of days ago. So there's more to come. And if you have ideas that you're like, hey, I would love a PDF of this, send ideas our way. We're so open to helping you feel supported.
Yeah, I think the support while we've been on about how wonderful you all are and how much of an impact you've made. So thank you both so much, just generally, but specifically for the last half hour. Really appreciate your time tonight, and we will be following up in the next month with another session probably about some similar and other interesting topics. So thank you. And thanks everyone for joining. We'll see you all soon.
Well, thank you so much for having us.
Yes,
Bye.
thank you. Bye.